Yaakov's like, if I'm having a fight, if I'm having a struggle, if I'm having a wrestling match, a challenge, I can't let you go until you bless me. I can't let you go until I realize what the blessing is from this struggle. Because if there's a struggle, there's something that I can learn from this. There's some blessing to be had from this pain and this struggle I'm in.
Meaning he's not willing to pick himself up and move on from the struggle unless he's captured clearly, what do I need to take from this?
Exactly.
So too in life, every struggle we both go through, we're meant to not ask why, but what now? What should I be doing? How can I use this to grow moving forward?
Every day, we are blessed to interact with some of Colorado's most interesting people. On this podcast, Judaism with Altitude, we share their fascinating stories with you, and
we have a great time.
Welcome back to Judaism with Altitude. It is great to be with you here this lovely evening. How are you doing? I don't think I've seen you all day, sir.
Good to see you. That's why we do it, right?
That's why we do it. This is date night for us. Date night in the studio. One day, God willing, we're going to have a proper studio with a microphone. Yeah, I'll say you need microphones and headphones. And the truth is...
You don't.
Well, you don't. But one time I think I tried and for the life of me, could not figure it out. I'm a smart guy. I could not figure out the whole microphone thing. Completely not. I really don't understand it. So if any of the listeners out there know how to do that in a very easy way to explain, just let us know. And on that note, we did get some amazing feedback this week to a friend of ours in, I think, Arvada or Westminster. Thank you for the feedback. And if anyone else has feedback for us, as long as it's kind and positive, we want it.
Do you remember what he said?
He appreciated the metaphor of how we explain spirituality from a fitness perspective. And it was very gratifying to hear. And we appreciate all of your feedback. I know I've actually encountered some of you people, you listeners, devoted listeners, and you do verbally tell us all about it. And that was very nice. But it was also special to see that feedback in the written form. So thank you for that. Thank you to everyone who's shared your thoughts with us about this. It means a lot. It helps us to keep going. Sometimes when we do this, it's late at night after a very long day, and we do it because that feedback means a lot. It shows us that hopefully you're getting value from this. We're getting value. We get to spend more time together. Otherwise, I would have been sleeping now for an hour. I wouldn't have seen you at all today.
And we definitely wouldn't be having a meaningful conversation at this hour.
That's true. So it's true. We got to have a nice conversation, a lovely date night. So thank you for being with us tonight. Tonight's topic is honestly a lesson or some lessons that we can derive from this week's coming Torah portion, Parshas Vayishlach. And at first glance, you might hear oh, we're talking about the Torah portion. I learned that in Sunday school.
Also, it comes every year. It doesn't seem so urgent or fascinating. But I'm actually really excited about this because it shows, not only that it shows, but really there's such amazing wisdom for life that, we're calling it, that we're talking about this because it's in this week's Parsha. But at the same time, this is a relevant lesson for our life today. And that's where we happen to be pulling it from. But the Torah is full of amazing wisdom for a day-to-day life to just help us figure out how to navigate so many different things. The balance between physicality and spirituality, and individuality versus unity of a group, and just so many different things in our life. There's wisdom to guide us.
And the reality is many things in life that can be complex. For example, this amazing Apple Watch. What version is this? It's one of the nice. It's a nice one. And I don't know what it is, but it does so much stuff. If I read the instructions, I can learn how to snap my fingers to answer a phone call.
I was trying that today. It wasn't working.
So we might have to set it up. We need to read the instructions.
Yeah.
Or I have the 4th generation Apple AirPods noise canceling edition, an amazing device. And if I read the instructions, I can learn how to press it while it's in my ear to switch modes from noise canceling mode to a different mode and where I can hear what's going on around me. So, but in order to optimize that, you need to read the instructions. So our Torah means instructions. Life is complex. It's not always simple or intuitive, but the Torah gives us guidance and light and instructions in how to navigate this thing we call life.
This actually reminds me, because this feels like my second podcast of the day. We just had before this our Olami Wednesday night women's learning, and we were having a fascinating discussion that's not so different from what we were talking about so far, what we will be talking about. We were just talking about how things can be complex, and there were all these different ideas that we were talking about that was fascinating and practical. Where do our desires come from, and do we appreciate more intrinsic, what's it called?
Value, worth,
approval.
Yeah,
versus extrinsic, and just lots of different things. Who am I becoming, and who do I want to be? Like, they're really complex ideas, and I have no idea where I was going with this, but it was also a very interesting podcast-like discussion.
The Torah tells us about this week's Parsha, the epic battle between Jacob and this man who encounters him in the night. And interestingly, immediately before that happens, the Torah says, "Vayivaser Yaakov levado v'yavek ish imo." Yaakov was left alone when a man started wrestling with him until the break of dawn. And Rashi says, what was he doing left alone? What was that all about? Rashi says he had forgotten some small jars, and therefore he had to go back for them. And we see from this that the righteous treat their property with care, so that they should not send forth their hands at theft. They were very careful with their stuff, which has nothing actually to do with what I wanted to mainly discuss tonight, other than just point out, since I'd say COVID, I've just taken a very strong interest in personal finance. And one thing I've learned about all the successful like millionaires and people like that is that they're very careful with their stuff. They don't just waste. They're smart with their stuff. They're not wasteful. They don't just throw. It's kind of a crazy idea to think about what Yaakov did. It reminds me of a scene from my favorite movie of all time. It might have won an Oscar.
Dude, where's my car?
That too. But Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. One of the greatest scenes in the history of Hollywood is where they step outside their apartment and not 10 feet away, they realize, dude, you left your phone in the apartment. And he's like, they both look at each other and they say,
we've come too far.
We've come too far.
Now I know where that line comes from.
So Yaakov, however, was like, I didn't come too far. I left my stuff, even small jars, somewhere else. I need to go back for them because my stuff is valuable. I can't just have this wasteful attitude in my life. And I thought that was interesting to say, to cherish our stuff and not to be wasteful. And God willing, I want to do a finance episode at some point. We'll bring in maybe some guests and bring the guests back and do some interviews on that. But be that as it may, that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I want to talk about is this incredible passage of Jacob fighting this man. So I'm going to read it, and then maybe we'll think about some questions we could ask, and we can maybe answer those questions and come home with some profound life insights. Sound good?
Great.
Okay. So the Torah says, again, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he perceived that he could not overcome him, he struck the ball of his thigh bone, and the ball of Jacob's thigh bone became dislocated as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for dawn is broken. And he said, I will not let you go unless you have blessed me. He says to him, what's your name? He said, Jacob. He said, no longer will it be said that your name is Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with the divine and with men and you have overcome. So that's the passage of this fight. What questions can we ask on it?
Who is this person that
Who
he's
is this?
fighting with?
Who is the person he's fighting with? The Torah says, what happened? He was by himself. Vayavik ish imo. There was a man fighting with him. Who is this man?
Who is this man to rename him?
Who is this man to rename him? I'll ask another question. Why did Jacob ask this man for a blessing? Why was the blessing a new name? It's kind of a crazy idea. If you imagine somebody gets mugged, God forbid, and they fight, and at the end of this epic long battle and fight, the victim who got mugged has this guy in a headlock. And he says, I'm not letting you go. The guy wants to get let go. He's like, I'm sorry I mugged you. Let me go. And the victim's like, I will not let you go until you bless me. It's kind of an odd picture to imagine. One would think if you got mugged, as soon as you could get away, you run away. Or you keep fighting the person, but to ask him for a blessing, it's kind of a weird request. What's that all about?
Yeah, great question.
Furthermore, what's it all about that this all specifically happened at nighttime? And why is it that this person needed to be released specifically by daytime? What about night? What about day? Furthermore, why specifically did Jacob get injured in his thigh bone? It's kind of random. What's the lesson from the Torah there?
Yeah.
It's a lot of questions. So maybe we'll deal with them one by one and hopefully can come home with some practical lessons.
Interesting. I would say this is an obstacle in his life. It's something he had to, obviously it's something he went through, so it's something he had to go through. I heard this great quote from another podcast I like, the Manifestation Mentor. She's a Jewish woman in Israel. She said, obstacles are often reroutes to a better destination. And it's an opportunity to understand oneself more clearly. And I think that's part of what's going on here, that there's some sort of challenge that he's going through in this fight. And the result of it is he gets a new name. And it's bringing him to another place, another level, another destination, another reality, another identity, whatever it is. And he's learning about himself, I think, through this experience. And we're learning about him also.
Beautiful. And along those lines, what's he learning? So I heard quoted, I believe, a year or two ago from Rabbi Shmuel Silber, who has amazing ideas on the Parsha he shares. And I think he quoted, I forgot who he quoted. And I heard this again, it was a year or two ago. He says that if you look at Yaakov's life until now, he's very, let's say, I don't know if passive is the word, he's very non-confrontational. He avoids conflict. When you think back a few weeks ago, at the end of Yitzchak's life, when he goes to claim his blessing, that he rightfully purchased, it was his rightful blessing. One might ask, why didn't he just go to Yitzchak, his father, and say, Dad, could you give me a blessing? I know that I'm the younger son, but you should know Eisav sold this right to me, and it's my right. Why didn't he have that conversation? He avoided that conflict. Why?
It's so interesting. Yaakov is such an interesting character, if you really think about it, because he's the third of our forefathers. He's the father of these 12 tribes. He does some things like tricking his father for the blessing, and he has tense relationships with many people, as Rabbi Sachs says, with his father-in-law, with his father, with his brother for sure, with his oldest 3 children, which comes later on. It's such an interesting and at the same time relatable character for us to learn from.
Right. Absolutely. And regarding that relationship with his father-in-law, what happened at the end of last week's Parsha regarding this idea of lack of confrontation.
Oh, he didn't even say goodbye. He left when he was away, right? That's
He
another
dips out in the middle of the night.
trickery type of moment that he really.
According to Rabbi Silber, he wanted to avoid conflict. He was not into conflict. Rabbi Silber explains that maybe that's a little bit what this fight was about. Yaakov was instructed, he was learning this lesson that you can't run away from your conflicts. You can't always run away from your problems. Sometimes you need to tackle them head on, which might explain the injury. Where was he hurt? In his thigh. What can't you do if you have a wounded thigh? Wounded leg?
Run away.
You can't run. He was limping. You can't run away.
Right.
He was injured in a way that he could no longer run away. So what can't he do now? Now that he's finally ready to go encounter Eisav, finally ready to meet up with his brother after all these years, now that he's limping, what can't he go do now? He can't run from his problems. He can't run away from it. He has to encounter it head on. So that's an interesting idea. In life, it's so easy sometimes to sweep things under the rug, to try to avoid them, to not deal with them. But real growth often happens in life when you tackle those challenges head on, when you don't run away from them, when you lean into them. And maybe that's one lesson from all this. But there's a lot more to say as well. And another fascinating question, really interesting, is what's with the name change, right? So again, the verse says that they're in this fight, and the angel, Rashi says this man was an angel, the Sar shel Eisav, the guardian angel of Eisav, of the nation of Eisav, and that's who's fighting Yaakov. And they're in this struggle, and the angel says, you have to let me go because it's getting to become daytime. And Yaakov's like, no, not letting you go till you bless me. So the angel says, okay, what's your name? He says, Yaakov. He says, no, it's not going to be Yaakov anymore. It's going to be Yisrael. The Torah says, Ki im Yisrael, that'll be your name, Yisrael. Why? Ki sarisa im Elokim vim anashim v'tuchal. Because you strove, you struggled with God and with man, and you overcame. Sarisa, ki sarisa, you strove. Yisrael, you strove with God. Yisrael, that's what it means. Israel, Yisrael, you strove with God. V'tuchal, and you overcame.
Wow. So that's his name now is based on the struggle that he just had.
It's based on the struggle he had.
Can I share something?
His name is based on the struggle, and what are we all called? B'nai Yisrael. We are named after the struggle he had.
The name Yisrael, I remember learning this last year in the Parsha for the first time. It's so cool. If you look at the letters of Yisrael, it's an acronym for the names of all of our forefathers and foremothers: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. The first letter of each of their names is what makes up this word, Yisrael.
That's awesome.
Like, it really, this struggle for who Yaakov was really encompasses all of them to some extent.
Beautiful.
Represents them.
Here's a question again. I think I saw this also from Rabbi Silber, maybe in a different lesson he taught. When you think about it, there's two things that the Torah relates that happen here. There's two descriptions of what Jacob did with the angel. It says, Ki sarisa im Elokim, you strove with God, v'tuchal, and you overcame.
Two verbs here.
Two verbs. You strove, you struggled, and you won. Why aren't we named? Why wasn't Jacob named after the victory?
A great question.
Maybe we could have been called Yetuchael. Instead of Yisrael, Yetuchael, the one who overcame, the one who won. Maybe that would be a better name for us. We are Am Yetuchael, not Am Yisrael, the nation who strove, but the nation who won. Right? Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Why does this angel call him Yisrael? You strove with God.
There's something powerful about going through this struggle.
That's exactly, I think, the answer. What's powerful about the struggle?
That's how we grow, is really in these the dark times. Speaking of financial things that you're listening to, I know a lot of what I've heard is, probably not everyone, but a lot of the people who have made it big and share about it, at some point they were at rock bottom. And that's what really propelled them forward, is whether it's in finances or in anything in life.
Right. I was going to say finances for sure. You get to a place like, I'm tired of this. I'm done with this. And you lift yourself up and you go figure it out. Or what we talked about last week, fitness. It might take getting to a low place with your health and fitness till you realize, wow, I got to step up now. I need to make some changes. Or anything in life. Today, we had this very great professional development at the school I teach at. Shout out to Mr. Gruber, and a real expert in education. And he said there's actually studies that the brain doesn't grow without failure.
Wow.
So he said, literally, even if you have a very smart kid in your class, make sure as a teacher, it's your job to make sure they fail at something. Maybe that just means that they get a problem wrong. But your job is to make sure that they miss something. Because by missing something, they can learn how to get it right. They can learn, it's a valuable lesson to miss something, and your brain responds better to that. So that's how we are cognitively. And I would say anything in life, from that failure, we need to go through that. We need to go through that struggle in order to properly grow. Without that, we talked last week in the fitness episode. Without that resistance, you don't grow. Your muscles don't get bigger without that resistance. And what do we see comes of this? Right? What comes as a result of the struggle? What does Yaakov insist on? Weirdly,
The blessing.
the blessing. I believe I heard this again from Rabbi Silber. Yaakov's like, if I'm having a fight, if I'm having a struggle, if I'm having a wrestling match, a challenge, I can't let you go until you bless me. I can't let you go until I realize what the blessing is from this struggle. Because if there's a struggle, there's something that I can learn from this. There's some blessing to be had from this pain and the struggle I'm in.
Meaning he's not willing to pick himself up and move on from the struggle unless he's captured clearly, what do I need to take from this?
Exactly.
So too in life, every struggle we go through, we're meant to not ask why, but what now? What should I be doing? How can I use this to grow moving forward?
Beautiful. And what you said, I think, is exactly what I heard quoted in the name of the great Rabbi Soloveitchik, who said in Hebrew the word lama, why? Well, we don't really know why, but you could also read it as lema, for what? For what purpose did this happen to me? People go through hard times. They go through struggles. They get laid off. They go through difficult breakups. They have a hard time landing that next job, or they get offended, or their favorite football team has been bad for 9 years, or whatever it might be. But it's not in vain that they have these struggles. These struggles are there to teach them something. Within the struggle is some kind of blessing. It makes them that much closer to their right job, to the right spouse, to whatever it is. There's blessing in every struggle. And Yaakov is teaching us from time immemorial that when you have a fight, you have this wrestling match, you have this conflict, this struggle, don't let go until you can perceive a blessing.
It's amazing. I have so much to talk about
Go for
that.
it. That's why we're here.
On the one hand, just see if I remember it all. generationally, but also as a Jewish people, Judaism is about the journey. It's never about the destination. As we learn, the destination, what happens in the end from our efforts, it's not under our control. We've talked about this before, and I think on our podcast, but the only thing we control is the effort we put into something. And the journey of Judaism really begins with Lech Lecha, with Abraham, when God says to Abraham and Sarah to go on this journey. And so that's really what all of everything that we're doing is about, is this journey that we're all on. And we see with Jacob here, he was alone. It was at night. He's like running from place to place. And that specifically in that dark, scary time for him is when this happens to him. And it's not the first time. Rabbi Sachs points out that he also, earlier when he was running in the other direction, going to Lavan, running away and going right towards from his home and his birthplace, that he lays down and he also has a dream, a prophetic vision of the angels going up and down the ladder, which we talked about last week. Did we? We did in Parsha class. We didn't here. It's in these dark times that we see Jacob going through these struggles and how he grows from them and becomes the father of these 12 tribes, which if you think about it, is quite miraculous, because yes, he had such a hard life and he had a hard time raising his kids, and there's all this drama with Joseph, which we haven't even gotten to yet, but was worthy of a Broadway play, if that's to say anything, which not necessarily, but he is a father to these 12 sons who all follow in his ways ultimately, and the 12 tribes come from them. If you see every other generation, Abraham had 2 sons and Isaac had 2 sons, and in each case one followed on their path and one didn't. Here Jacob has 12 and they all follow in his footsteps, which says something to his greatness, I think. I mean, we can't control the outcome. We only control the effort. But maybe part of it is because he went through all of these struggles and he was able to pass on to them then everything that he learned, and in his spiritual DNA, everything that he overcame, he gave that ability to his sons, the heads of the tribes, but ultimately to all of us, the Jewish people. That's where we come from. And it's really these struggles and these challenging times, which it's so easy, I feel like, in our life and the world around us, there's just such an attitude of, oh, this happened, oh, that happened, and it's so easy to like get down and to blame circumstances and to blame things, but there's not really a general, like if someone's going through the street and let's say they stubbed their toe this morning, and you're like, hey dude, I stubbed my toe, high five. There's not an attitude of celebrating our struggles. And it makes sense why, because they're so hard and they're so difficult in the time. But as we get over them, and even in the more so in the moment, if we're able to some extent, to be able to see the good in them and the value and the growth, and to at least celebrate the growth that we're having in that moment, even if everything else is very difficult.
Right. And is this not literally the story of the Jewish people? Again, the Jewish people are named Am Yisrael. We're named after this. We're named after this concept of struggling with God. Is this not exactly our story? Every generation, right? When you think about it, what's a defining characteristic of a Jew? Right? Every generation, we go through challenges, we go through hard times, we go through these struggles. But what do? We go through struggles. We pick ourselves up. We overcome. We do overcome. Right? That is a part of what we do. We're not a nation of victims. We're a nation of survivors, as a friend of mine likes to say, end quote. And that's a big deal. We don't wallow in our victimhood, because trust me, if we wanted to, we could. If we wanted to, we could.
We have plenty to complain about.
My grandmother was born in a refugee camp in Europe, and she had a really tough situation in which she lost her entire family in the Holocaust. And what did she do? She picked herself up and she started a life and moved eventually to Haiti, to America, and here we are. was awful. But the story of the Jewish people is we're an Am Yisrael. We struggle, but we overcome. We pick ourselves up. It's exactly who we are.
This story of generationally of these time and times again, there's struggles. And actually, I learned from Charlie Harari that that's actually what builds resilience. There's studies about this and testing kids in schools and their ability to be resilient. And the common thread of resilient children is they have a story. They have a family story that they know of, oh, we went to this country and we lived there, and then we had to leave and we were escaping persecution, and then we went to another country and we started all over again. And those stories in the family history of overcoming challenges, when children have those stories and they know them and they identify with them, those kids are more resilient.
Wow.
And that's the story of our people.
100%.
And I think that's where resiliency comes from, is to the extent that we're learning these stories and we're tapping into them and we're identifying with them, that builds a sense of resiliency within us that, yeah, we're going through crazy times right now and things happening all over the world, which we're not going to get into because it doesn't matter, and it does matter, but also it doesn't, because at the end of the day, we know that we will overcome.
Right. And that's every generation. That's how it's panned out. One other thing that we started touching on, just to flesh out a little more, is that so much in life and in Judaism, it's about the journey more than reaching the destination. And that's a very important point to realize. We say in Pirkei Avos, "Lefum Sara Agra," according to the tsar, the pain is the reward. And there's this idea that maybe one day you'll go study in the base medrash. I'll go study. I used to do that. I drove to yeshiva. I go kind of far. And then I get there. I get so tired. I fall asleep. Was I wasting my time? There's an idea that there's schar halicha. There's reward just for the journey, just for going. There's reward inherent in that. And if I get there and I can learn, even better. But there's reward even in the process. The process is holy and vital and important. And often in life, we forget that. We forget how important the journey is. And the reality is, even like when you plan a trip, sometimes that planning of that trip is even better than the trip. We plan this, let's say, a fun vacation. Not that we could ever do this, but maybe one day, maybe we'll get major sponsors here on the podcast. When our family was smaller, we went to Israel and probably planned it out really good. Really excited, I'm sure we were. But on the flight, maybe a baby or two are awake. Maybe they're vomiting. Maybe they're keeping you up. You get to Israel, you're ready to go, but half your family is ready to go and you're ready to go to sleep. And it's not quite as glorious as the actual planning stage. So the planning is a pleasurable part of the journey. And the journey is just truly so vital and important. And again, just in the world of like finance, I've seen people talk about this, that it's very important as you prepare your goose egg and you prepare your retirement, that you don't spend your entire life just always planning for the end destination while forfeiting the journey on the way. What value is it if, yes, you now have a lot of money set aside for retirement, but in the meantime, you neglected your family, you neglected taking pleasure and joy in your life as you lived your life. As you went on that journey, you were MIA because you were so focused on only the destination, but not on the journey. It's like a tragedy. So part of the lesson here is to take pleasure, see the blessing in the journey as well, and not to forgo that journey, but to be present during that journey, to lean into that journey, and understand that very well might be the essence of what we're here doing, what life is about. And that is this world, Olam Hazeh, this world where we build our eternity forever on how we live our lives. That's all a journey. This is not a world of the destination. This is not the destination. This is the world of the journey. And we have to embrace that and appreciate that. And I think that's one of the profound lessons here of Yisrael striving with. That this is what we're named after. We strive. We battle. That's what this life is. One final idea. Any thoughts? Okay. One final idea is what's with the whole daylight nighttime deal? The angel of Eisav battles Yaakov specifically at night when it's coming to be daybreak. He's got to bounce. He dips. He needs to go away. What's with that? So I think I also saw from Rabbi Silber. Maybe I saw some of these ideas from somewhere else. But he says, quoting the Chafetz Chaim from the book Shem Olam, who basically quotes and says that this fight that happened at night, this nocturnal fight, is symbolic of what we call Galus Edom, of the Edom exile, the exile that the Jewish people find themselves until today, the exile we've been in for over 2,000 years. That's what this fight that Yaakov has with Eisav. Eisav is the progenitor of Edom. That's this fight. That's what's happening. So what do we learn from this? It's not necessarily the most uplifting idea, but it means that so Galus, exile, is symbolized by nighttime. As long as the nighttime is there and there's an absence of sunshine, the fight will endure. The fight will happen. The struggle will happen. And once the daybreak comes, the fight's got to be over. What does that mean? As long as we are in this galus, this exile we're in, we're not going to have it easy.
There won't be complete world peace. It's just not possible.
It's just not possible. That's not the way that God, it's not how we chose to make the world. So we think sometimes that we can find tranquility and peace somewhere. Well, look at Jewish history. In this exile, 2,000 years, literally every generation, people have hated us and they tried to kill us. It's been rough. And it's been like that every single generation because that's the nature of Galus. It's still this metaphorical nighttime. As long as it's nighttime, this battle endures. And I know we've spoken about this, but it just, to me, is so poignant with this time of what's been going on the last year plus. It's like, finally, I get what it means to be in Galus. Where can a Jew go where he really feels comfortable? Like, really, really feels comfortable. If things don't work out for us in America, right? You're going to go up to Canada, to Montreal, to Toronto. You're going to go to South America where there's higher levels of anti-Semitism, I think, than ever. You go to Australia. I think they start investigating if you ever served in the IDF, in which case they'll arrest you. I think I saw South Africa. Where are you going to go? The reality is, as long as this galus endures, we're in galus. There will be a struggle, and we pray to God that it's going to end soon, and we yearn for it to end, and we want daybreak. We want Mashiach. The Rambam writes, when Mashiach comes, it's not going to be any massive supernatural event. It's going to be, they're going to finally leave us alone. People will leave us alone. They're going to stop coming after us. And that's what we yearn for. That's what we hope for. But as long as we're embroiled in this nocturnal struggle, it'll be a struggle. It's kind of a sad message.
It's also, yes. And I think it really helps us prioritize our lives. We're only here for such a sliver of it. And God willing for 120. But in the long scheme of things, it's not so much. But I don't know, I think it really gives focus of what's important to me while I'm here. What do I want to focus on in life? And
right. We're not going to figure out how to get tranquility for our people. So
that's not the goal, is to live the most comfortable life, because I'm not going to be comfortable. I'm being told that. Yeah, to a certain degree. Hopefully we'll have our physical needs met so we can focus on other things. Hopefully we're lucky enough to have that, but many of our ancestors have not. And whatever we do have, we're so fortunate.
Right. Right. And I do take comfort in the fact that so much of the trauma of what so many Jews are feeling right now is that this is just so out of nowhere. This is something we've never experienced. The hatred and anti-Semitism at Columbia University and campuses all over the world. It's like scary, and it feels so suffocating. But if we take a step back and realize that this is how things have been every generation of our exile, every century, it's like this at some point. Okay, so it's not such a new thing. We've dealt with this before. God has promised us we will endure, and we've seen that promise come true, and we're going to get through this. We're going to struggle, and we're going to get through, and I think there's comfort there. So, yeah, it's a lot to talk about. A lot of profound lessons, I think, from this episode, from the Parsha, and hopefully we can utilize it in our lives to be inspired, and hopefully can guide us in living a more meaningful and deep life.
Amen.
Okay, so thank you for joining us here on this week's episode of Judaism with Altitude. If you like what you hear, or even if you don't, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, and share with friends, and give us feedback. We appreciate you joining us. Have a beautiful week.